Tanse, Anin, Ani, Sego, Kwe, Jenny Nitsikasun, Akihuin Cree Ochi. So my name is Jenny Blackbird, and my dad's family is from Kihuin Cree Nation in Alberta. My mother is from Finland, and I grew up in Toronto. So I work for the Ciimaan Kahuwe'ya Qajaq Indigenous Language Initiative Program at the Centre for Indigenous Studies, University of Toronto. Today we're going to walk you through the steps to make your own orange shirt pin to honor residential school survivors on September 30th. So stay tuned. So here I have a few examples of the orange shirt beaded pins that I made. I made this one a couple of years ago, and you can see the beads are a little bit irregular in size, so it gives it a little bit of texture, and also the edge stitching is kind of like a little zipper edging, which is pretty cool. And this one, the beads are more uniform and they have a little bit more of a shine to them, and I've changed the direction on the beading so there's a little bit more of a different shape and effect to it. And also the edge stitching for the beading is just looping it around, so that's pretty simple to do. And also I have created one with, I guess, the bugle beads, and these are quite pretty. These are shiny, and I've not edge stitched this one, so you can also do this as well if you're not as confident, or you don't have the time, or you're just satisfied with the way that this looks. So there's no wrong way to do it. You can get creative and put some really cool intention into your orange shirt pin, and think about the folks that went to residential school and the survivors, and hopefully that this sort of horrible series of events never happens again. And if you are running out of time or you just don't feel confident, you can also take a piece of orange felt or orange fabric and create your own pin and just put a little safety pin on the back. So there's many options, so stay tuned and we will help you figure out what you want to do for your orange shirt pin. Okay, so if you have received the little beading kit from Danny, you will have inside a paper template of a little shirt, a little t-shirt. So you can staple that to the little piece of white felt that you've received. And if you did not receive a beading kit from Danny, you can also freehand draw your own shirt, or simply do what I did. I actually just took a Word doc, and there's little clip art of t-shirts, so you can size them as big as you want. I think this one's maybe like inch and a quarter. You can make them bigger or whatever you feel is the right size for you, and you can just print that off and use that as a guide, or just freehand draw it. And for the backing, I just have this piece of vinyl, so I'm including the vinyl in with the kit. So once you've done your beading, this will be stitched, or you could even glue this onto your pin, but make sure you leave a little space that you don't glue down, that you're going to put your pin backing through. So we'll walk you through those steps, but just prepare your template. You can either staple it down, or you can just tack it down with a few stitches here and there, and then make sure it's not within this area. So you want to be outside of the boundaries of the t-shirt, because once you're done the beading, you're going to have to cut around, and you don't want to have this staple in your beaded area. Okay, so here's the 3 pins that I showed you earlier, and I thought I would give you a second to look at the styles and look at the colors and the way they are. And we've got some orange beads here. So I will show you how to start a row of beading if you've never beaded before. And hopefully you have successfully threaded your needle. I know sometimes it's hard, but there are different ways to do it. So take your time, and you can do a single knot. Sometimes people use a double. They take both ends, but I like to use the one. And sometimes also people like to use 2 needles when they're beading. I like to just use one, but it's all up to you. It doesn't matter how you do it. There's no wrong way to do it. Just as long as you have a needle and some thread, you're good. Okay, so we're gonna start and we're gonna plan where you're gonna start beading. So I'm thinking I like to go right next to this line here, and I'm gonna keep going in this direction and fill in all this, and then I'm going to change directions and fill it in this way. You can do it either way. You can even do it on a horizontal if you like. It just is up to you in terms of how you want to try it. So I'm going to take my needle that I've already threaded and knotted, and I'm going to stick it just a little bit above where that bottom border is. So I will thread. Hopefully, yes, the knot stays so you don't pull it all the way through. And then you're just going to thread, or you're going to put beads on your needle. And you're going to fill it up as much as you need. Sometimes I like to check, like to pull the beads through and check. Okay, so I still have quite a bit of beading to add there. So I still have quite a few beads to add onto this needle. So we keep going. And this is a cool time when we're allowed to be back together in spaces. A lot of the times people do beading and they do storytelling, they share jokes, you catch up on all the latest, I don't want to say gossip, but maybe all the latest news, the news from home, you know, who's going to school, who's studying hard, who has some good new jokes, those kinds of things. And so hopefully one day we can get back to that once this virus is contained and there's some kind of treatment for it that is effective. And I hope you're all taking care of yourselves and washing your hands lots and eating well and getting lots of rest. So here we are. I think this is okay. And we're going to take our needle. And you want to make sure, and this is where it takes a lot of practice with like holding down the thread and making sure the tension is good. So I'm going to make sure that I line it up pretty good with the edge there. And I'm going to stick my needle through. Okay. Hopefully I'm holding this correctly so you can all see. Okay, so we've got it like this and it's loose. Now you're going to go back and you're going to have to hold it again with your fingers. Work on the tension. I know a lot of beaders say it's so important to get the tension correct. So I usually go every third bead. So you're going to come up through here, through the bottom. Sometimes it takes a few pokes through. Okay, so I've pulled my thread through, and then I'm going to stick it on the other side of this third bead. And that should hold it down nice and securely. And once again, you want to make sure that you want to make sure that the tension is correct. That's what I'm trying to say here. So continue that way until you've got your first row tacked down. Okay, so I have my first row tacked down. I actually went back and took one bead off because it seemed a little crowded. So sometimes you can do that. You can stitch it down and say, I better change this, or there's no shame in taking it apart or taking it out. And also, if you take your time, your thread won't get tangled up. And there's another trick in case you haven't been beading for a long time or never tried it, there's also some wax. You can get wax or beeswax beaders like to condition their thread so it doesn't tangle as much. So you can just run it across. Sometimes people use candle wax. So if you have a candle, I've also heard people using soap. I don't know how good that is, but it might smell good for a while. So you can just condition your thread so it doesn't tangle as much, because that is a thing that does happen. So don't get frustrated and think that it's not a normal thing to happen. So take it easy on yourself if you've never beaded before. Just take your time and don't worry about looking perfect or being perfect, because everybody's beading is going to look different and everybody's style is unique, and you also want to make sure that you're being kind to yourself. That's very, very important. So here we are with our first row done, and you want to do the same thing. So you want to find your spot and start your second row, and fill your needle with your beads. And oftentimes, as I just said, just be kind to yourself. Oftentimes people will reflect while they're beading, or they will think good thoughts. And so when I bead these types of orange shirts, I think about my family members who were in residential or day schools out in Alberta, and the ones that never shared their stories. I really hope that they have the support they need to unpack that and work on what they need to work on, because there's so many people who may not feel comfortable with sharing their stories, or having to think about the things that happened in residential schools. So it's really good to put in some energy, thinking of these people. And there's also some teachings behind when we bead, that we try and be in a good mind, like we try and be in a good headspace, and we're not angry or we're not frustrated, because that will come out in your work, and your work will reflect that energy. So sometimes when I'm not feeling too hot, on my game, and like, oh, I'm not having a good day, I won't bead. I put it down and I do other things to take care of myself, have a cup of tea or go for a walk or something, eat something good. So it's very important to remember that self-care piece, and to think about the work that you do, and to see the difference. Like, I totally see the difference when I take my time, or when I've been hurried and rushed, and oh my goodness, it makes such a difference. And you feel better when you see your work. You see that good energy reflected in that work you do. So we're just going to continue with the rows, and I will come back when we're done all these rows, and we'll talk about doing the sleeves and then the border. So we'll give you some time to start your third, your second and your third, and so on in the rows of the t-shirt. Taking this one off, there's too many, so I'm just going to run it through, and see, it gets a little knotted sometimes, so don't worry about it. Okay, so I've jumped ahead and I have beaded the rows and rows of orange beads to create the body part, the torso part of the shirt. Now, if you can see, I'm not sure if you can see all the stitches that are in the back there. That's how much work it took. And thankfully with our sheet of vinyl or the felt that you may be using, it's going to cover everything, so don't worry if your stitches aren't very beautiful or uniform. It's cool. It's all going to be hidden. So now what we're going to do is I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to not worry about cutting and restringing the needle. I'm going to bring my needle and my thread up to where the sleeve starts so that I can start my work on doing the same technique for the sleeve. So I'm going to bead rows and rows here to create the sleeve. So you're just going to continue this work and you're going to continue to, you know, think about what's going on, think about what the work you're doing is. And sometimes it's good to like just kind of guess how many beads you need for this. So I'm thinking that might be okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's try it out. And sometimes when I'm beading, if I'm not with anyone else, I sometimes put on music, or maybe podcasts are good. There's a few really good podcasts out there. Secret Life of Canada. Also some good radio like Unreserved. And there's Red Man Laughing. So there's a lot of really cool Indigenous podcasts out there, or radio shows. There's also, I'm going to give a plug here, Indigenous Waves. It's at CIUT 89.5 FM on Mondays from 6 to 7 p.m. And you can listen online as well. So www.ciut.fm. And there's currently only music, but when the radio station is allowed to open again, they will feature interviews with artists and musicians. So right now it's just a lot of Indigenous music. So it's kind of cool. You can tune into things while you're doing your beading if you're not with other folks. Or like I said before, sometimes people get together and they just chat and they have fun. Okay, so I've removed that bead because it was too many. You don't want to crowd your beads. That's the one thing. That's the one thing when you're doing some beadwork. You want to make sure your beads lay relatively flat and they're quite uniform. So in this case, I removed that one bead, so now there's 4. And I'm going to once again go through and over to stitch down the beads that I've put on that first thread. And you always want to try and go slowly. You want to keep your thread straight, because there's nothing worse than pulling your thread up and it's like a big spaghetti mess. So you don't want to frustrate yourself, and you just want to try and keep it uniform. But also know that if it is a big spaghetti mess and you have to undo, you have to just cut it, it's totally cool. Nobody's watching you. Nobody's judging you and saying, oh no, you did it wrong. So just keep trying, keep trying. And it's that old saying, practice makes perfect. Okay. And I think we're off to a good start for the sleeves. So I am going to continue this, and then I will come back and help you with the next part of your own beaded orange shirt pin. So we'll just take a couple minutes just to show you how it's done. And in this case, I think I'm gonna go up 2 and 2. So I'm tacking down 2 beads, and I'm gonna go on the other side and tack down these other. So there'll be 1 bead in the middle actually. And you can start on either side, either left or right, whichever. It's all good. Whoops. Let's see if 6 beads will fit. Okay, I think that's looking good. Okay, so I'm gonna finish this off and then I'll come back and show you more. Okay, so you can see here that I have finished my one sleeve and now I'm going to start the second sleeve. But as it turns out, I guess the way that I've positioned the beading, or the beading it doesn't exactly fit within the borders of this t-shirt. So I had to add an extra bead on this side. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can be perfectly symmetrical and perfectly particular if you want, or it's okay. You know, this has gone right on top of the black line. It's still going to look good because we're going to put another row of beads all the way around this to make a border. So whatever you feel like doing, you can either extend the sleeves and make it longer. You can even make the shirt longer. You can make the shirt bell-shaped if you like. Get creative and put your own energy and your own thought into your beaded orange shirt pin. So I'm going to continue this and I will come back and help you do the border. Okay, so now you should be done your sleeves, and we can add a contrasting color to outline your orange shirt. So we'll just move these orange beads out of the way. We can put them away, but I thought I would just use the black because it'll be a nice contrast. And then the edge stitching, I was thinking of using this really nice cream color just to either do like this cute little zipper stitch, or look how shiny that is, or the different edging that just, it's like rows and rows of beads you just stitch on. So basically you're just gonna find your, and look at that, I got a extra little bead there by accident, so I can probably snip that off. I can take a pair of pliers and clip it off, or I can leave it in there because one of the teachings that I know, it may be common, is that some people leave a mistake in their beading purposely, because no one is perfect. No one at all. Not any of us is perfect. And so that's kind of a reminder that we're just human and we're just doing what we do. And I may just leave that in there. I don't know. We'll see. And so what we'll do is we can start, maybe we'll start here and just come through the front. I'm going to come through the front here somewhere and pick up a bunch of beads and just sort of measure how many you need for each little section. So I'm going to need a few more. And also too, when you're doing this kind of work, it's important to maybe try and get the same size of beads, because if you get beads that are too big or too small, it might look funny. So I think these are all the same size. There's like an 11 size that I usually use because they're big enough. The 10 might be cool, but as you may age, or your eyesight may not be as good. My eyesight is not very good. I may need to use bigger beads. So see how that fits. Like, just sort of test it out. Do I need to? I think that should be okay. So I can just take that last bead off. I'm gonna go back through here and can just kind of zip it back through and remove it. Okay, so I've determined that that will probably be okay for me to fit. And go back down in, pull your thread out. And then you can do the same thing where you tack down maybe every third bead or every 2 beads. I know some people do every bead. That's a lot of work, but it's probably going to look fantastic in terms of flatness and stability. So you do however you feel and whatever makes you feel good. And the more you practice, the better you will be at maintaining your style and your groove, I guess, your tension, and sometimes a signature. Maybe there's a color that you always use, a color combination, or something that makes it yours. So, all right, now this is the fun part. The beads will probably fit nicely this way, but there may be a gap. So it's not uncommon for sometimes people to put a bead on a different angle. So it's totally cool to do that. You can just fit them in. So I am going to take my needle and I'm going to fit these 2 in. Whoops, and I just pulled my thread. I pulled my thread out of my needle, and as you can see, as you work, your thread gets a little frayed, so you might want to cut it again. And let's see if I can bead this needle live on camera. Well, it's not live, but on video for you. And my hands are quite dry because we've all been washing our hands so much. Now the weather is getting colder, so be careful of the dry fingers. They may fray the thread. Okay, so I'm going to do just these 2. Tack them down. Okay, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this a little tricky here. I'm going to put the needle through and take my bead, my single bead, and I'm just going to stick it in there like that. Just so it fills the space. So it's just a little bit nicer. So then I'm going to continue all the way around. And then when we're done that, I will show you how to cut it, take off these staples, and then attach your backing and edge stitch. Okay, so I just thought I would jump back in and show you. So for the tricky parts, like the curve here, so I thought I'd help you figure that out in case you didn't know. So you're gonna string your thread with beads, and curves are great because you can just pull this down. So you use your thumbs a lot to hold down all the beads that you want to make sure are secured in a specific place. So once again, it's all about tension. It's all about holding things in the right place and making sure that nothing's too tight or nothing's too loose. You want to find the exact perfect middle ground. So you see how it's kind of adhering, sticking to the right place. So I gotta use my thumb to hold it down. And it may take practice, it may take a little while, but I just thought I'd show you in case you hadn't figured it out, or if you're kind of wondering how do you manage everything. And once again, just keep practicing. If it doesn't work, take it out and try again. And you can always rethread your needle. Don't forget to knot it when you end, when you before you cut it off and try again. And you can always start again. And I only have a little bit more left to go. See, and I can try and shape it a little better if it's not working out the way I like it. Okay, so we've done all our edge stitching here, and it's got its own style. You know, it's not absolutely perfect. None of us are. It's totally cool. So we're gonna take off our staples. If you have a staple remover or nails like I do, you can take them off easily. Or if you have tacked them on with a little bit of thread, you know, just knotted it here, 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 and here, you can just cut the thread off. Some people may like to do that. So once that is done, then I'm going to carefully tear off this paper, because this was only here to guide us. The paper is going to stay underneath there. There's no way they can take it out, but that's totally fine. So then you're left with this felt edge, and you're going to have to figure out what you want to do. What kind of style of edging or no edging are you going to have on your beaded orange shirt pin? So I'll just remove all of that. Okay, so it looks pretty good. And now you want to take your scissors and maybe just figure out, do I want to have a big amount of felt showing, or do I want to have no felt showing, or is this fine? So you can do either one of those, or any other choice that you might have. So I kind of like, I kind of want to try this one again. So I'm going to cut it. I'm thinking that's 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And sometimes there's little tiny pieces of paper. Gotta really pull them out. So we just cut them like that. Okay, so that's what it looks like at that stage. I'm going to get your vinyl. And that's how it's gonna look before you start. So then you can take a pencil and mark on the wrong side of the fabric. So I don't know if you know anything about fabric or sewing, but the wrong side of the fabric is the underside that you don't see normally, and then the right side of the fabric is the fabric that you see on clothing or furniture or whatever it might be that you're creating. So we want this nice vinyl side to show on the back like this. But first, I think what we'll do is we will add some markings to make sure we have enough space for our pin to go through. So I'll be back in a second with a pin. Okay, so I've got my vinyl cut. So it's sort of covers the back so you don't see all the stitches. And you can also add the pin backing. So what we can do is, if you did receive a kit from Danny, it does have one of these cute little pin backings. Or if you're working from home and you don't have pin backings, you can also use a safety pin, which is totally cool, and it's maybe easier to deal with if you don't you know, have the dexterity to work with one of these pins. But these are generally pretty easy to use, so I'm going to use one of these guys. So I'm going to flip it over and kind of figure out where I want to put the pin. So I like to make sure that this opening part is down, facing to the bottom of the shirt. And I'm going to take my pencil and I'll figure out, okay, is this a good spot, or do I want it down here? I think I'm going to put it up here. So I'm going to mark where I'm going to put a slit. So right where this connects and this connects. So I'm going to do this, and I can either take scissors and snip like this, make sure you don't go too far, or I can take an awl, if you know what an awl is, and poke a hole here, poke a hole here. Or if you're fancy and you have some supplies like this, you can also use a hole punch and maybe put it on the smallest, or the second smallest, maybe the 2.5, because you can squeeze this through the holes if they're smaller, especially this vinyl. But you want to make sure that the holes aren't too big, because you don't want this to kind of move and wiggle around. You want to make sure it's going to be stable. So I might use this. Let's see how this works. I think that's the smallest one, and I'm going to put a hole here, and hopefully this will work. And a hole here. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed it through. So see how I should have it this way, so that the bottom, the little opening is here. So I'm going to feed it through, and hopefully this is big enough. Ta-da! And this way. So there's just enough room to hold it. And if you really want to hold it down more, you can take a drop of crazy glue or nail polish to hold it down. And failing that, if you want to make it super secure, you can stitch it down. Like, people probably won't see the back, but so that is what it will look like. And these are various types. This one's just foam. This one's just like a dollar store foam. It may come off, but if you don't have time to do the full beading all the way around the edge, you can do that too. It's just a little foam adhesive sticky, and then you can take it off later, or if you want to actually bead around it. Totally up to you. So I think I'm going to go get myself a dab of glue, and then I will come back and start the edge stitching. Okay, so we're going to do the zipper stitch on this for the edging. And if you have any questions, I'm just going to show you the beginning, and Danny can help you further with the process. So I think I'm going to start here. I'm going to go in between the layers. I'm going to go through the vinyl so that the knot that I made is going to be on the inside, so we can kind of hide everything. So I'm going to take 2 of these little beads, these cream beads, and I'm going to put them in the top. And whoops, I'm not going to knot them. That's always the trick, to make sure you don't knot your beads and get tangled up. So now that I've gone through, I've stitched them to the felt and the vinyl, I'm going to go through this bead here, up, Okay, then I'm going to add 2 more and sort of eyeball it and see, maybe I think it's 1/8 of an inch. And so you see how it kind of helps that bead jump up on the top. When we put the needle through the second bead, that makes it lay flat against the edge. So we're going to try it again. I'm going to take 2 beads and put them about maybe 1/8 of an inch away from the last beads. So you can see it's going to start shaping up to be really nice edging. And this will look really good on a lot of our fall colored coats and jackets and hoodies. You can really see that nice contrast of the cream color, but you can decide whatever color you like, whatever moves you, or whatever we've got in the kits that we gave to Danny. Or, like I said before, you can just leave it blank. You don't have to put any beading on it. So I'm going to continue this, and then once I'm done, I'm going to come back and I'll show you the finished product. But in the meantime, you can ask Danny any questions. All right, here we go. Finished product. The beaded orange shirt pin with the edging and the vinyl backing and the pin. So take your time, remember to have fun, and hopefully one day we can all get together in real life and have some tea, do some beading, and tell some stories. Okay, take care of yourselves and each other. Hope you're all well and healthy. Bamapi.